Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hi, and welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. This is going to be part 2 of the Mindful Parenting series. And I want to refresh a little bit what I talked about in part 1, because just in case it's a refresher or you're tuning in for the first time and missed the last session, I want to be able to catch you up on what it is that I'm delving so deep into today, which is the area of being a mindful parent. And this is so much more of a practice than it is something to add to your to-do list, because we need to create the space to be more present, more aware, paying attention to what's going on inside of us, and especially what's going on with our kids. And I work with so many parents that have really, really good intentions, but really poor execution. And part of that is because there's no rule book on how to do this parenting business. And maybe one day I'll write one, but I get feedback from a lot of parents that it is just so hard, and the frustration over each of their kids being different, the frustration over things that worked yesterday aren't working today and probably aren't going to work tomorrow. But most importantly, what I hear from parents is they're exhausted. We live in a culture and society that glorifies busyness, and so we run around and we run, and we don't often find the time just to slow down and be. And more importantly, we're raising our kids in a culture that isn't fostering them to know how to slow down and be. And especially with social media, we never get a chance to disconnect. I mean, we as parents are just as excited about the social media, and our kids didn't grow up with it in the way that we didn't have it, right? They did grow up with it, and so they don't know life without it like we did. They don't know what it was like before cell phones existed and before games and the entire internet could be at their fingertips, or TV at their fingertips at a moment's notice. So now more than ever, it's really hard to teach the skills to slow down, to disconnect from outside distractions, so we can calm our brain, calm our body, be more present, be more focused. And, here's the implication of why is this so important? Well, there's a lot of pressure academically. And if kids are struggling at all with their emotions, their brains are not primed for them to learn. And so if we could give kids the tools to be able to know how to focus and pay attention at school in a more effective way, and behind that, if we could give kids the tools to manage and regulate their thoughts and emotions, then we would be raising a society of people that are able to be resilient, able to be more compassionate, able to turn towards gratitude versus entitlement. And these are all things that we aren't raised in knowing how to do. But the good news is that they are learnable skills. And for me, when I started practicing mindful parenting, everything shifted because, I had a story of how things wanted to be. I was the youngest in my family, and I didn't often feel like when I was growing up that my voice was heard. And I thought, well, now that I'm a parent, I have a voice and it will be heard. And unfortunately, that wasn't the most effective parenting tactic. And I found that the more often I tried to be heard and raise my voice to try to enforce a rule or a boundary or a consequence, it was often met with resistance. It was often met with a lack of follow through on my kids' part, partly because by raising my voice, by having that expectation that I always knew what to say or to do and that it was going to be listened to, I often failed to be present with what was going on with my kids. And once I tuned into this, everything shifted. I became less reactive, and I became much more open and compassionate to why it was they were acting out, or maybe be curious about what was going on behind a behavior or an emotion that they were experiencing. But if I'm too caught up in my own story and my own expectation, then I miss all of it. And I'll talk in future episodes about discipline and behavior, because I think that needs to be given its own space. But I just wanted to speak a little bit more to why is this so important? And, I keep coming back to this idea of our devices and social media, because I hear from a lot of families that they feel disconnected. And as long as we have a device nearby, then we are missing the opportunity to connect with the people near us. And the more and more that happens, we are unlearning the skill of connection. And this is going to impact dramatically our relationships in the future, whether it's our relationship with our kids or how they're going to grow up with their peers and their partners and as they become parents. So I find mindfulness as a huge solution to this issue of busyness and disconnection, because it's a practice of slowing down. So as you practice mindful parenting, what does this mean? Well, it means two things, actually. It's one, developing the tools for you to find your center, your place of calm, where you can be observing what's arising in you, when you can notice your mind's tendencies to get stuck and to ruminate, to go into the future with fear and anxiety. It also is a practice to help you use your breath to calm yourself down when you're feeling yourself getting frustrated and triggered and imbalanced and ungrounded and overwhelmed or anxious. But mindfulness is also an opportunity for you to see with clearer eyes, to let go of any expectations, any thoughts, any shoulds about what you thought it meant to be a parent, and allow yourself to actually be present with what is. And in the last session, I went over some tips and tools about how to start this. And just as a very quick reminder, I went over how to use the breath as a foundation, that's going to be the tool to draw you back into the present moment. I talked about being aware of your child's sovereign nature. And that has to do with this idea of parenting to the kids you actually have and honoring who that kid is, even if they're difficult. They come with challenges, as they all do, but we have a huge spectrum of challenges that kids today are facing. And letting go of an attachment to how we thought it was supposed to be, and allow yourself to be present with what is. If you did nothing else but throw out of the window all these expectations and shoulds around your kids or yourself on your parenting, that away would strip away such opportunity for you to shed what's holding you back from truly connecting in a really authentic way, and being able to develop the empathy and compassion with your children to teach them the skills of self-regulation and to self-identify what's going on with them, to eventually lead them to skills of problem-solving and resilience. So this respecting your child's sovereign nature is really, really a foundational tool. I talked about how to use our body as a tool for being more mindful, whether that's our kind of more spiritual intuition side of paying attention to our sixth sense, our intuition, trusting the messages our body is telling us, but also in teaching our kids the skills, our kids the skills to be able to trust their bodies and their intuition. But in addition to that sixth sense of being aware of the messages our bodies are giving us, also being able to use your body as a tool for calming down through an experience like a body scan meditation. And those things of recognizing that our body is a metaphor for what we're experiencing. And our body is holding all of our emotions and our memories and our thoughts. And we've got to learn how to release them so that way we're not getting stuck. Okay, so taking a deep breath, slowing down, paying attention to the cues of your body. These are all ways that we can start to communicate with our kids about how to bring more mindfulness into the home. Bedtime is a really great opportunity to practice some of these. Parenting with your senses is another quick review. Are you actually seeing what's in front of you? Are you paying attention? Are you being aware? Are you listening with open ears, with an open heart, with compassion? Are you listening without judgment? I'm going to talk a little bit further on at the end of the session around how to communicate effectively. And one of the key tools in effective communication is how well you listen. I'll talk more about that. But also the opportunity for mindful eating, which I'm going to give a whole nother episode about. Mindful eating as a practice you can do as a family. All really key foundations to developing the skills both in yourself and then be able to role model to your kids. And we ended with talking about developing empathy and compassion. And this is so much at a root of a mindfulness practice, because with being more mindful, what we are in essence wanting to do is to have the self-compassion to allow whatever's arising to exist without judgment. Because you see, the opposite of compassion is judgment. And judgment becomes a default. Judgment is easy to show up when we are living in expectations, in shoulds, in our thoughts. And when we can remember to come back to our compassion, then we were much more forgiving and it becomes easier to accept what's arising. Now, being mindful and accepting what's arising does not mean you have to like it. It simply means that being in resistance doesn't make it go away. So whether you're dealing with a challenge with your kid, I get it. It's hard. It's painful. I work with the families that this is their day-to-day lives. I have my own children. I know what it's like when we get stuck, when we get triggered. But to not accept what's arising does not make it go away. It makes me more reactive, which in then turn makes them more reactive, which creates disconnect, which is the opposite of the intention of trying to be more present, which allows for greater connection, greater depth, greater understanding. Because we all, whether adult or child, we just all want to be seen, heard, and validated. And when we are seen, heard, and validated, then we feel the freedom to be authentic. And, many of you listening, if you're married or you're in a relationship, even you just want to be seen, heard, and validated. And if your partner is receiving you with judgment, it shuts you down. And you know how that feels when you just get denied your ability to express yourself authentically. And our kids feel the same way, no matter how old they are. That's why they have tantrums, because something is not being understood and they don't know how to otherwise react. And sometimes as adults, we have tantrums. But when we can be curious and compassionate to what's going on, what's bubbling underneath the surface, then we are open to be able to connect in that more authentic way. And one of the best ways to teach our kids this is to role model it. And so, some are born more inherent than others having these tools, and some need to learn it. And so we can role model this through our practices. One of the best ways you can do this, by the way, is when your child comes to you with a problem, don't necessarily try to fix it. Just listen. Just offer them a hug, or just join with them in their frustration and be like, oh man, that's such a bummer that your field trip got canceled. I am so sorry that happened. I know if that had happened to me, I'd be really disappointed. So I really understand the level of disappointment that you're feeling right now. Joining with the child's experience allows them to be seen and heard and validated. So enough recap, even though I've given some different examples there. Hopefully it's helping you be able to connect deeper with the why we are doing this. And moving on to some additional tools. So as a parent, what do you do when you feel caught up? I know when I get overwhelmed and I get triggered, I default to some really unskillful patterns. That might mean I'm short-tempered. That might mean I'm impatient. That might mean I've just stopped listening. But when we are operating from those unskillful patterns, we're in reaction mode. And it just becomes automatic pilot to react. And we're unable to see the situation clearly for what it actually is. And then when we can't see clearly what it is, we just get carried away with our thoughts. And when this happens, we lose our ability to allow our child's sovereign nature to thrive. And then we fail to create meaningful connection. So we want to be aware of those things that cause us to feel caught up or triggered. And that's when we start to spin in that cycle of overreactivity of our thoughts, of believing all of our thoughts, of labeling our emotions as positive or negative and then judging them. So one of the things to do there is the first step is always awareness. How to have the awareness, I'm really stuck right now, and then take a deep breath to calm the brain, calm the body, allow you to get back into your present moment and be able to redirect towards your intention. And this is that idea of responding, not reacting. If you're not aware of your trigger points, you might be easily getting activated by them. And I think I mentioned earlier in the previous session that our trigger points and our reactivities, they're likely things unresolved from our own childhood. And our kids are playing out their own story, but we are getting triggered by our story. And this can become a self-fulfilling prophecy of defeat when we just get stuck. And we're reacting to them because something inside of us is hurting. And without that awareness, we're unknowingly putting this story onto them. Once again, not being present, creating disconnection. So we're really wanting to set the stage to allow whatever's arising to exist without judgment. Now, again, understand, doesn't mean you're going to like everything, but it means that we accept it because it's already what's here. And fighting it doesn't, make it go away. It really only makes it bigger. So the key here is to be in a different relationship to our thoughts and emotions. And we want to be in what I call the observer mind. We want to create space between the thoughts. And when we can do that and we are observing them, we can see them. Oh, there's just that thought. Oh, there's that one again. Oh, look at that thought. There goes that one. Almost like you're standing on a train platform and these thoughts are just coming by like a train pulling into the station. But when you're being mindful, you're deciding with intention which car of the train to step on board with intentionally. Because when we're being unaware, we're just hopping on that train each and every time it pulls into the station without any awareness or intention. So how do we relate this back to our kids? Well, one of it is it gives us some language that we can use. That example of the train. I used this when I used to teach mindfulness to kids. And this was something that they really understood. Imagine you're standing on a train platform and this big, long train of cars pulls into the station. Each car represents a different thought. Decide which one you want to get on board with. And having a simple language for kids to understand that they can use helps them to create some space in not believing all of their thoughts. Because this is one of the keys in where we get stuck. How do we not believe all of our thoughts? Because our mind is going to produce between 50 and 70,000 thoughts a day. And because of our negativity bias, many of them are going to be negative. And they're not our truth. They are just thoughts. So we also want to give our kids the same space to feel their emotions without judging them. And we are so quick to give our emotion a label of positive or negative. It's good or bad. And what I want to be able to shift here is the language around labeling our emotions as natural. There are definitely some that we like. There are definitely some that are less desirable to feel, but all of them are natural to the human experience. And the more we strive and cling and grasp to what I will say are the positive emotions, invariably we are in denial, resistance, ignoring, pushing away the difficult ones. And kids, we need to teach them that all of them are natural and normal to be human. And I like to point out the example, and this is something that kids really get. And if you haven't seen the movie Inside Out, I highly recommend. It gives a great example, and it's quite scientifically accurate with our emotions and how our brains work. But, the movie Inside Out is all the different emotions taking their turn being at the control panel of our brain. And we think that joy is the one who should always be there, but actually the heroine of the story is sadness. And so it's a beautiful reminder that we need all of our emotions to balance us out. But one of the keys that I like to teach kids, and again, this helps with our language and how to talk to them, is this reminder that this emotion won't last forever. Just because it's what you're feeling right now does not mean it's what you're going to feel in 5 minutes or in an hour or tomorrow. And kids don't quite have the grasp on time and space. And so it feels like it's just going to take them over and it's going to be there forever. So nothing is permanent. This is one of the key tenets of mindfulness, right? Nothing is permanent and everything is constantly changing, as are our emotions. And when we recognize we're getting stuck in our thoughts or in our emotions, we need some tools to be able to get out of that. And so, the key here is to create space. So notice whether you're being stuck in your own reactivity around thoughts and emotions, and be curious around how you're communicating this to your kids. Now, I've done this for so long, and my kids have gotten so used to me communicating in a language that uses a lot of these words. And for you, it might really begin to feel like learning a new language, because some of these words I describe may sound awkward. And at first they are, but they really become effective in how we begin to interact with our experiences, with our emotions, and with whatever's arising in the moment. And so the key here, create space, notice when you're getting caught up, notice when you're getting triggered, and take a breath, slow yourself down, and be curious how your triggers or you getting caught up in that reactivity is preventing you from being present with your child. And remember, the key is you actually just want to practice being. These human beings that we are tend to be more of human doings. And we need to create more space for the being. And when we practice these tools, that's why I keep saying the word practice, because we're never quite arrived. We've never quite gotten there. But we need to give ourselves the space and the self-compassion to say, I handled that really well. I wasn't reactive. I was kind and compassionate in my open-heartedness. I listened. I didn't just try to solve. I was curious about the emotions that were arising. So great. Sometimes that's going to be the case. And other times we might yell, raise our voice, and throw a consequence. So don't judge yourself when that happens. But what I'm really curious about is the effectiveness of the latter and what it does to build deeper connections with our kids. Now, I'm going to insert something here. This isn't to say that being a mindful parent means that we don't enforce consequence. Years ago, I was teaching a mindfulness class for parents, and this dad raised his hand and he said, so if my son just throws some toys from the back seat at me while I'm driving, I should just take a deep breath and calm myself down and accept what's arising without judgment? And I said, no, not at all. Being a mindful parent does not mean to be a doormat. It does not mean that you don't enforce boundaries and consequences. It's just being clear on your reactions. It's being clear on your level of presence. It's being intentional in your communication. When we can be more intentional with all of those things, we're creating better relationships. We're creating greater resiliency in our kids. We're allowing them to feel, like I said in the beginning, their sovereign nature, their uniqueness. That does not mean that we don't create boundaries and that we don't have house rules and that we don't have consequences. Not in the slightest. So I hope I'm not confusing in that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying there's a way in which to go about it that can be more skillful than others in not only creating the deeper connection, but in giving your kids the tools that they need to manage the many challenges in life that they're going to face. So one of the last areas here that I really want to address is how to communicate with your child. And there's a really great book called Between Parent and Child by Dr. Chaim Ginott. It came out in, I believe, the late 60s. It's not always easy to find. I'm sure Amazon has it somewhere in limited edition. But he was really revolutionary in how to communicate with our kids. And coming off the tails of the 60s in which, parents had this mindset that kids should be seen and not heard, Dr. Chaim Ginott shifted that relationship to communicating more compassionately. And I really think he was one of the first authors of what would truly be known as a mindful parenting book today, because we so often get stuck in communication. Just think about your own communication with your partner or with someone who you have as a constant in your life. You have a conversation and maybe you're not even fully present for it. Maybe you're down looking on your phone as they're talking. Maybe you're looking it up every now and then. But what often happens is, as someone is talking, we are preparing our response before they're even done. And then we are anticipating their response to our response. And then we're anticipating our response to their response to our response. And we are 5 minutes down the conversation, and we've so believed that that's how it's going to unfold that we don't actually slow down to be present with what the other person is saying. And we have a lot of judgments, and we have a lot of expectations. And this also gets in the way of our communication. So again, once, these tools are both for yourself and therefore how to role model to that of your kid. So mindful communication gives us the opportunity to put all these skills into practice. The breath, the body awareness, where we can pay attention to the cues our body is giving us. It's being mindful of our senses. Are we using eye contact? Are we listening with an open heart? Are we actually seeing with open eyes? Are we paying attention? Are we being aware of our thoughts and our emotions? Are we being empathic? Are we having compassion? All of these skills come out in our communication. And so we've got to be aware of all of it. And I know it sounds like a lot, and it is. And that's why communication often isn't effective, because we're reactive, we're in judgment, we're basing something off an expectation or a should. And we really want to be able to come towards more with gratitude, with loving kindness, with respect, with the desire to be empathic, be compassionate, to allow each person, parent and child, their own authenticity to develop this relationship. So this is where I like to give a practice that you can, practice with whomever. But if you can imagine someone talking with you, maybe you're just listening to me right now. So maybe we can use this as the example. But as you're listening, think of what is coming up into your mind, because I'm sure there are things that you want to react to or respond with or ask a question of, or things you want to interject, or maybe things you're not agreeing with. Maybe there's questions you'd want to ask for delving in something further. Maybe it's reminding you of something you learned once before, and you're wanting to recall that as an example that you get it, or that you're showing demonstration of having a connection to it. Be aware of what's coming up for you. And obviously right now, as you're just listening, you can't respond back to me. But when you have greater awareness of all of those things that are coming up when you're listening, then be really, really mindful in how you communicate after the fact. Because what I find so often happens with parents and kids is that as kids are talking, parents are looking to solve. They're looking to fix. So much so they even have the exact idea how it should be solved and fixed, which is negating the child's own sovereignty and figuring out, negating their resiliency or their problem solving. It's under the assumption we always know better. And sure, maybe sometimes we do, but we don't always. And when I've led this as a communication exercise in classes that I've taught, and when someone has the opportunity to just be listened to without the interjections, without the, what you should do is, without any of those, the talker, the speaker actually has given the feedback that they felt more heard than when people interrupt and ask questions or interject. So this relates back to parents, because I find that parents talk way too much and they don't listen enough. Because if we listen enough, our kids are telling us exactly what they need from us. You know, the other day I was working with a client and they had a young child who was really acting out, and they're like, oh gosh, she just needs so much attention. And they actually gave a consequence, and you know, it's not unskillful parenting. However, what the child was telling them is, I need attention. So when we listen on a deeper level, what is the child actually needing? They actually can tell us. I was working with another client recently who said, oh, my kid just keeps, you know, this was a teenager. Oh, my kid just keeps telling me, just leave me alone. And the parent kept interjecting. So what is the child actually needing there? They're needing some space. They're needing some downtime. They're needing to be able to come back to the conversation when they've maybe had a chance to calm down or after school decompress. So when we can listen more openly without expectation, our kids are telling us a lot of what they need. And parents often don't always hear this. I can recall another instance in which there was a young girl who was acting out in depression. And when I said, well, what do you think she needs? And again, she had told them, but they were responding with a judgment and almost wanting to give a consequence around the behavior. And they're failing to listen how to use that as a point of connection. Another really key part of mindful communication is what's called the repair attempt. So whether this is you in your own practice as an adult, or whether you're practicing this between you and your child, it's how to repair when there's been a misstep, when there's been an argument, when there's been a blunder, when there's been a confusion or a disagreement. And the repair attempt is, how are you owning your shit? How are you owning what you said or did that may or may not have been as skillful or as kind or as helpful to the situation? Parents don't often apologize to their kids. They don't think they should. I'm the parent. This is the way it is. But we're also role modeling, right? And so if we want our kids to be able to own up when they've had a misstep, we need to role model that to them. So what would that look like? How would that sound? It could be an example of, you know what, honey, I am so sorry that I lost my cool earlier. It wasn't right of me. I'm really tired. I'm really overwhelmed. I've had a long day. My patience is gone after this long day, and I apologize. I was not as able to listen to you, and I snapped at you. And so I'm sorry that I snapped. And, you know, next time when you see that I'm so overwhelmed, I would like to ask that maybe you give me a little bit of space before I keep asking for whatever it is you need. So you can own what you've done as naming and, you know, giving that repair attempt. And you can also ask for your needs in return to how to make it smoother for the next time. But you really want to see how your communication is in alignment or is being congruent with your values. Because we often are not in alignment with our values or our actions in what we really are striving for. And so, you know, being more mindful of this, slowing down our process, being aware, owning what's arising. This is a way that we can role model the type of communication, not only that we want to be giving them, but that we want to receive. Acknowledge your child's thoughts and emotions and experiences with awareness and love and compassion. And this is a process that you guys can really develop together. And I've developed a booklet called Take a Mindful Minute, and it's for parents and for kids to develop a joint mindfulness practice. And this is a link that I will have available for you. And these are a series of tools. They can be mantras, they can be reminders, they can be a basis of a meditation. But it's about, the idea is to create the space for parent and child to delve into this work together. Because I get so many families who come to me to say, my house is just chaotic. I'm feeling so overwhelmed all the time. I don't feel like I have a good handle on my parenting. I feel like my kids are out of control. I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And I feel frustrated and I'm yelling and I'm not really happy. And this isn't how I thought it was going to be. This isn't how I hoped it was going to be. And yet I don't know what to do different. I mean, this is a story unfortunately, I hear a lot and I have such compassion for, because it's hard. Having a family, raising kids, dealing with life, it is hard work. And no one teaches us the skills until you decide, I need to learn something different. And that's where I come in, that I really want to give you the skills and the opportunities to see where the learnable and teachable moments are. Where can you pivot? Even if you've gone, you started down the line of raising your voice, you still have the ability to pause and redirect. I used to say to my kids all the time, wow, you guys, you know what? I'm really getting frustrated right now. And I'm starting to, I'm feeling my heart rate start to increase. And I don't want to say something I don't mean. So I'm going to pause for just a moment and I'm going to take a minute and just breathe. And then I would literally take a few deep breaths in front of them. And as I paused and took a deep breath, it shifted the whole energy. And that was me role modeling, I can redirect. Just because I might have started off in reaction doesn't mean I couldn't correct it to be back in alignment with my value and intention, to be more present, to be less reactive, to be more responsive, to be more compassionate to their frustrations. So all of these are skills that we can build upon. And it's all going to start with the awareness that something isn't working and I'm ready to shift it. And, there's another thing too, is that parents often come to me and they say, my kid is experiencing all these things. They're experiencing restlessness, they're experiencing lack of focus or attention, or they're reactive, or their behavior is an issue, or they're having a lot of anxiety. And, they want me to come work with their kid, which I can. But I always prefer to say to the parent, let me work with you first, because the parent has the ability to shift the entire culture of the home. And when the parent can get a handle on their own thoughts, emotions, sensations, distractions, their breath, their body, their empathy, their compassion, their communication, focusing in on gratitude and loving kindness, then they can role model that and the kid will get that inherently. So this is why I do what I do, and I know that it works. I know that it's an effective tool to be able to be more present with your kids, to be able to develop the culture and environment in which you feel connected and present and calm. And it's possible. So check on the links. I hope that they are helpful to you. If you want more, tune into future episodes on mindful parenting, or also my website, joryrose.com, has a lot of different resources that will be helpful to you, some free downloads, some meditations. And I hope that you are able to take these tools and practice more mindfulness in your homes, and your kids get to reap the benefits.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.